We have been doing this series that we've been looking at for the last couple of weeks, and will be for a few more weeks yet, on women in the Bible, where so far we've looked at Mary, the mother of Jesus, and then Mary Magdalene as well. So I figured, why not go for the hat trick, really? There's another Mary in the Gospels it'd be good to look at. This time, Mary of Bethany, and we'll look at her alongside her sister Martha, and both of those two were sisters of Lazarus as well. All three lived in Bethany. We've looked at this, I think, once before, but there's a lot in this story. So there's a little story in Luke's Gospel concerning these two sisters, Mary and Martha, who had invited Jesus into their home. So here it is. It's from Luke chapter 10, just 4 or 5 verses from Luke 10, verse 38 onwards.
As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things. But few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her."
All right, it's a famous story we may know quite well. Mary sat and talked with Jesus while her sister Martha chose to get on preparing the food and doing the housework. And not surprisingly, Martha comes up to Jesus to have a bit of a moan about her sister Mary. She says, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." And it's a pretty standard argument, I imagine, among households probably up and down the land to this day over chores. We might think, actually, Martha is busy kneading bread in the clip there. We might think that Martha's got a point. You know, it's not fair that she's doing all the donkey work while Jesus and Mary just sit about. And I guess we might well expect Jesus to say, "You know what, you're right, Martha. I can see you're sweating there. Sorry. What can we do to help? Let's all muck in." And yet Jesus doesn't say that. Now, instead of grabbing a tea towel or whatever, Jesus responds with these words. He says, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. And Mary has chosen what is better." Now, it's not, I think, that Jesus is simply championing a chilled, contemplative approach to life. It's not some divine permission to loaf about, as nice and as needed as that sometimes is. Instead, by Jesus highlighting the one thing which he says Mary has discovered, well, I think that's a glimpse into what is really going on here. You see, it's significant at the top of the story. We're told this, that Mary sat at Jesus' feet listening to what he taught. Why might that be significant? Well, back in biblical times, when a person is described as sitting at someone's feet, particularly someone who is a teacher or a rabbi like Jesus, it means they are that teacher's disciple, their student, their follower, their apprentice. Now, 2 thoughts on this. Firstly, we shouldn't underestimate how radical it was of Jesus to commend Mary as his disciple. These were sexist, even misogynistic times, so women weren't generally reckoned to deserve the opportunity, or in some writings we're told they were thought of as not even having the necessary brains or ability to be a rabbi's disciple. And yet here Mary is clearly taking that position. Just as we saw with Mary Magdalene last week, Jesus is thankfully shattering the glass ceiling, if you like, for women in his day by championing them as people deserving of and capable of being his disciples. Indeed, given the patchy record of some of Jesus' male disciples, we can say these female disciples on the whole did a generally much better job than the men did. Indeed, with Mary here, Jesus commends her decision to follow him as the best decision of her life, calling it the one thing that truly matters. But then secondly, in championing Mary's dedication, I don't actually think Jesus is having a pop at Martha at all. Now, his Martha phrase, I think that's an expression to sort of say, come on, just calm down, listen to me here. It's a phrase of real tenderness and empathy. Of course, Jesus knows that meals still have to be cooked, housework needs to be done. We might say reports have to be written, shifts have to be worked, nappies have to be changed, and so on. Rather, it means that above all that busyness and activity, the one thing worth being concerned about most of all is whether we're allowing our lives to be shaped by and led by Jesus. Now, what might that look like in practice for us? Well, I guess on one level, it might sound pretty obvious. It's about being kind and caring, being generous, and so on. Not always easy, but fairly straightforward kind of things, to treat other people as you want to be treated mantra. And yet a lot of the time, I say that straightforward, a lot of the time it's far from easy to work out what the right thing to do is in different circumstances, in all sorts of different situations. For example, what does doing the right thing look like when a family member has dementia, or really needs to go into a care home despite their wishes and knowing that it will wipe out their savings? What's the right thing to do in that situation? What does the right thing to do look like when you're asked to look after the grandchildren again, who you love to bits, but you're beginning to resent perhaps the lack of time and energy that they leave you with? What does doing the right thing look like when you know a friend of yours is maybe drinking too much and doesn't want to admit it to themselves? What's the right thing to do in deciding whether to make a complaint about a colleague's work or someone who served you, which could well get them the sack? I'm sure you can think of your own examples where doing the right thing, we might say living life God's way or following Jesus, is far from straightforward. It's far from easy to always work out. And yet the good news, I'd say, is that Jesus doesn't ask us to work these things out on our own. You see, that's why I suspect Jesus doesn't go into the kitchen to help Martha. He doesn't encourage Mary to go into the kitchen to help Martha. Not because he or they are unwilling to help, but I think because Jesus really wants not them to go and join Martha doing the jobs, but he really wants Martha to come and join him and Mary. He wants her to know that she can be his disciple too, that she's got a lot to contribute, her wisdom, her experience. She can join in their discussion and be a disciple of Jesus too. The food could wait. And yet as iron sharpens iron, I imagine Jesus knows that these sisters will need each other's wisdom if they're to truly work out what being his disciple means. And so for us, with these two in mind, yes, I'd say the most important thing we can do in life is to tend to our relationship with Jesus, because it's from this that everything else that's good in life will flow. But we're also called to do that in the company and with the benefit of others living that life alongside us, helping us to work out together what following Jesus really looks like. So may we be inspired, therefore, by Jesus' radical invitation to Mary to follow him and by her willingness to accept that invitation. But let's also aim to be alongside each other, just as Martha was no doubt encouraged to do, to offer each other the support, the counsel, and the care we need as we seek to put the ways of Jesus into practice. Amen.